Alexandra, welcome to the Unruly Podcast. I'm so excited to have you back.
Thank you, Calen. I'm so glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. You just participated in a, you know, earth-shattering, headline-making action, a historic action. So that's what we want to talk about today, because I know it is like a hot topic right now, as it was intended to be, but there's so much more than what people see on social media. So I'm excited to pick your brain about how everything went and your thoughts and feelings on everything.
Great. I'm happy to talk about Ridglan Farms and the beagles trapped inside.
Yeah. Well, first things first, we have a surprise question for you, which is unrelated. And that is if there was a world where humans did not exist, so we did not have this sort of dominion over animals that we think that we have, what animal would you like to be for a day?
Oh, wow. Well, I'd like to be a bird, and I'll tell you why. I'd like to be, specifically right now, I'm thinking a blue jay because right outside my mother's house, just off her porch under the eave, is a blue jay with a nest full of four little babies who just were born like 2 days ago. And so every time I go to my mom's, I climb the steps and take a little peek to see is the mama on. She still lies on them, I guess, to keep them warm.
Yeah.
But then she's also gone quite a lot, I guess, getting food for them. And sometimes you'll see that typical picture of a baby with the beak to the air and opening and closing. And so, anyway, yes, I'd like to be a bird to be able to fly and also kind of have eggs and sit on them and feed my babies. Sounds beautiful.
It sounds beautiful. I think a lot of people will be like, oh, I want to be a bird for the flying, but I never thought about the baby part, the
And I
baby
don't have,
egg part.
as a human, I don't have babies, never wanted them. So, but
Right.
just was the mother, she's a hero. She's taking care of all of them alone, as far as I can see. There's no papa there. I haven't seen.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you for letting us use our imaginations a little bit before we get into the hard-hitting stuff. So, for people listening who haven't heard about this Ridgeland Beagle rescue, can you give us a little bit of background information on what Ridgeland Farms is?
Sure. So, this unfortunately is a world with humans, and it includes Ridgelan Farms, which is a beagle breeding facility. They breed beagles and sell them to research labs. They also have a small research business on the property, also where they contract to do research on their own beagles. But for the most part, this is a facility that's been open for 60 years in Blue Mounds, Wisconsin. I think at its most it had 6,000 beagles, but now it has 2,000. And that's a lot in part to the bad publicity it's garnered because of all the animal cruelty violations that it has been cited with, not by animal rights activists, but actually by state regulatory agencies in Wisconsin. Among them are over 300 violations of animal cruelty laws that because of their practice of doing surgery on these beagles without anesthesia and also without a licensed veterinarian. So they used untrained vet techs to do this surgery called the cherry eye surgery, which I
Okay.
don't know if it's particular to beagles or what, but it's some kind of a issue with the eyelid of the beagle, and they remove the inner eyelid at Ridgeland when you don't really have to do that, because when you remove the inner eyelid, it causes dry eye for the rest of their lives. So they're doing not only unnecessary procedures, but procedures without anesthesia and without a trained veterinarian. And now, because of all the scrutiny and I can talk about the history of how Ridgeland Farms came under scrutiny, but because of all
Hmm.
the scrutiny in the last couple years by state regulatory agencies, Ridgeland Farms agreed to shut down on July 1st because it wanted to avoid felony animal cruelty charges. Its lead veterinarian was also forced to resign by the Dane County, which is the local board of supervisors, a unanimous vote. So the veterinarian was forced to to step down. So that's good news. But the problem is that the beagles remain in this facility, 2,000 of them. And this is what we were trying to do on March 15th, was to rescue and release the beagles from this place that has been had so many violations. And when I say 300 violations, 308 specifically for doing surgery on beagles without anesthesia. But there have also been violations of not taking care of animals when they are injured. They live in wire cages all their lives, and also poor ventilation, poor sanitation, so basic neglect. And yet the beagles remain. And the concern is that by July 1st, they're still allowed to continue breeding and selling these 2,000 beagles until they shut down. So they've been punished, but the beagles don't get any kind of freedom or respite. They're going to be sold to labs and then endure a terrible life. So what animal activists have been asking for years is that the beagles be rehomed to loving homes, and taken out of these terrible conditions. And because the authorities did not listen, that is why activists went in on March 15th.
Right. So for listeners who are just sort of thinking about this, can you give a little bit of information on what happens to these animals when they are sold and they're used for researching purposes?
So beagles are 96% of the dogs that are used in research labs are beagles because they are so sweet. And also they're a medium size, but mostly it's their nature is so sweet. It makes it easier for humans to torture them. And the next day, the beagles will not bite you. They won't retaliate. They are so sweet. It's a cruel irony. So they get sold to laboratories either for research for drug companies or for basic research. And a lot of it is, may I just say that now in 2026, we don't need to use animals for research, for medical research. We do not need to. In fact, it's holding science back to use animals for research. Why? Because the research that these places are doing are usually for humans, right? But a dog is not a human. If you give a dog chocolate, that's really bad for them. If you give me chocolate, I get happy. And so if they had tested chocolate on dogs, I wouldn't get chocolate. There'd be a world with no chocolate. So that's how bad the science is. I know I'm joking, but I'm trying to make a point is that over 90% of the drugs that are found to be safe and effective in animals they then go to human trials for the last phase before they're sold to consumers. And 90% of those drugs that worked in animals do not work in humans. That is, and so wild. These drug companies who've spent years, and it takes, I think, on average 10 years and $1 billion to bring a drug to market, and they've just wasted it. So and that cost is passed on to consumers. So even if you don't care about dogs, even if you don't care about science, maybe you'll care about the fact that your drugs are so much more expensive because we're using an outdated way of testing them for safety and efficacy. And the number goes up, by the way, for cancer drugs. It's 95% of cancer drugs that work in animals, either for safety or efficacy, do not work in humans. So as somebody, I think it was from the NIH said, yeah, we've cured cancer in rats, but we haven't cured it in humans. And it's because we're using a bad model. Non-human animals are not good models for human drugs. And so right now in 2026, it's so exciting. There are things called organs on a chip where you get human organs, human cells. You can connect them all together and you can make an actual body that has a metabolism. And you can test drugs on these. Look it up, organs on a chip. And not only is it cheaper, it's faster. You don't have to wait for animals to reproduce if you want to check reproduction issues. You don't have to worry about the sameness of animals. One of the things that these breeding places do is they want to have this sort of the most, neutral animal, right, that they can test on. You don't have to worry about antibiotics that are put in
Mm,
animals that are confined in these places, that you have testing mechanisms that are clean, that don't involve live animal suffering, and they involve human tissue, not the tissue
right.
in. Yeah, and standards, at least for the FDA for pharmaceutical drugs, mean you have to test on a non a rodent and a non-rodent. And what these companies do, and it's understandable because of the costs of how much they put into them, they'll test it on a rodent, let's say a hamster. If it doesn't work in the hamster, if it doesn't come out either safe or efficacious in a hamster, they'll move to a rat. And then if it comes out, if the results come out well on a rat, they'll be like, okay, look at our rat studies. Forget about the hamster studies, it didn't work. And they also have to do
Right.
it on a non-rodent, which usually are dogs. Could be cats. I don't know if it could be birds too. I know the birds are also tested on, reptiles. So many animals are used for tests, but if it's not doesn't work in a dog, they'll do it in a cat until they get the answer they want. And this is also another reason, of course, why it won't work in humans, because it hasn't worked in this species. It might not work in this. It's just so
Right.
random. So we need to test these drugs on human cells, not on animal cells. So that's an argument for not using, not doing animal testing, because a lot of folks might think, well, I hate the idea of it, but if my son had cancer, I would want to have the
Hmm.
drugs that we get from science. And I'm telling you, folks, using animals is bad science. We need to use these more human relative things like organs on a chip, in vitro testing, where they put things in a test tube, and computer modeling, AI. All these things are so much more efficient. And luckily, 2 years ago, the Congress passed, and I think it was unanimously, that now drug companies don't have to use animals, because before they were mandated to use animals, and now they can
Right.
choose a non-animal model. So I believe that once these breeding places are put out of business, and there's no more stock of animals, that the science will just move forward exponentially, because right now there's so many people who make so much money off the old way of doing things that they're holding on very tightly to the old way, even if it's not as scientifically viable as the new way.
Right. What's so wild to me is that as a species, humans say we're so different than animals, than other animals, that it's okay for us to eat them and to use them for all of these really cruel and violent industries. But hey, we're similar enough to test our life-saving drugs on them. It's like make it make sense, because those two things are completely opposite. Like, are we similar enough or are we not? Because if we are, then I think people would have to rethink about how we use other animals, and they don't want to do that.
You're so right. That's a really good point, Calen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. I mean, there were things that you just talked about that I have never heard about. And the fact that these companies do not have to test on animals at this
Not
point,
anymore.
and that it would be cheaper and safer for them to use alternative methods is wild. And I think more people need to know that, because that's not common information.
They do need to know that. And they also need to know, which I was surprised, because I guess I've been immersed in this for years, is that they didn't know that dogs were used. And you know how people are
Mm,
speciesists. So, not people like you and I understand that, it's whether it's a cat or a dog or a crocodile, they all have feelings, or a bee, they all have feelings and lives, and they have a right to live. But a lot of people, the thing about Ridgeland that I think made the action on March 15th go viral was the fact that it was dogs, and people
right.
can so I'm okay to lean into the speciesism of humans for this, if it'll help the
Right.
Ridgeland Beagles. So
Right. Whenever I saw the action and I saw the video come out and all of that, I was like, "Oh, this was intentional with dogs to like ease into this message, titrate it, and then pull people in and show them the bigger picture."
yeah. Can I give you a little bit of the history of Ridgeland and animal activism?
Yes, yeah, we would love to know that.
So in 2017, Direct Action Everywhere, an animal rights organization, and its founder, Wayne Shung, co founder, Wayne Shung, uh, organized an investigation into Ridglan Farms. So this was almost 10 years ago. And when they did this, an investigatory team went into the property. Now, there weren't any fences around the property then, and the doors were unlocked. And they walked in and they videotaped a breeding barn. There were
Mm.
dogs who were circling crazily from the stress of being living in cages for up to 7 years. Because remember, this is not only a facility that sells dogs; it also breeds dogs so that they can have more puppies to sell. And interestingly, and it might seem counterintuitive, but the older dogs go for more money because a
Mm.
lot of the drugs that we use in the United States for humans go to older people. So they want older dogs, and what you multiply in dog years, 7 is 50. So a lot of the dogs had been in these cages for 7 years. And so they were exhibiting a lot of stress. These are 2x4 cages. A lot of them are alone in the cages, stacked on top of each other, no stimulation, no, very little care. I read an interview with one of, I think it was the Ridgeland's lawyer with one of the regulatory agencies, and this lawyer admitted that Ridgeland Farms only has two workers on a Saturday and two workers on a Sunday taking care of all the dogs. I mean, hello? And when he was asked, what is the social stimulation? He said, well, they walk by and they say hello. That was his idea of social stimulation. So in
Wow.
2017, a team of animal activists, animal investigators from Direct Action Everywhere went into Ridgeland Farms, documented, rescued three beagles, and as is with all open rescues, they posted it, did not hide their faces, and it took several years, but Ridgeland Farms, or the prosecutor of Dane County in Wisconsin there, brought charges against three of the investigators: Paul Pickelsheimer, Eva Hamer, and Wayne Shung. And in 20, I think it was 2024, so it took a while. Remember, the initial investigation was in 2017. In
Yeah.
2024, they were supposed to go to trial. And a day before, or I think it was a day before the trial, the prosecutor dropped the charges because Ridgeland Farms didn't want the trial to happen. Probably because they don't want discovery to come out. When you're in trial, you can ask for a lot of paperwork and photo and pictures and how you run your business, etc. And they didn't want that. Now, Ridgeland
Mm.
Farms, from my understanding, said they'd received death threats. I find that kind of, I don't believe that. Certainly wasn't from Direct Action Everywhere. And so I don't know
Right.
if that's true or not. But anyway, the charges were dropped, much to the dismay of Wayne, Eva, and Paul, because they wanted to
Mm.
go to trial. They felt that they had a very strong case for animal cruelty and for the right to rescue.
Mm.
So, because the charges were dropped, Wayne, who is a lawyer and was a law school teacher at University of Chicago Law School, he asked the judge, he said, look, you've seen all this footage that we've shown you up to now, all the pretrial talking, all that stuff. They have to decide what is allowed in and what's not. You've seen all this footage. You need to look into this. You need to look into these charges of animal
Right.
cruelty because look, it's right before your eyes. So amazingly, the judge said yes. Amazingly, because usually they don't want to do that. But she said yes, and she hired a special prosecutor to look, to investigate further Ridgeland Farms. And the special prosecutor found a lot of violations, and to avoid these felony animal cruelty charges, that's why Ridgeland is shutting down. So it really stemmed
Mm.
from open rescue and documentation by animal rights activists who went in peacefully and nonviolently and documented conditions. That's how it started. But it took it took 7 years to even get to trial. And then what? Now it's been 9 years, and we're still fighting for the rescue of these dogs at Ridgeland Farms.
For people who don't know, I just want to add that anything you do with the legal system, especially if you're arrested for activism or something like this, where the business or whoever's going against you doesn't want people to know about what they're doing, the legal process takes so long. And I think listeners here aren't of the mind that just because it's law, it's ethical, right? We've got a lot of rule breakers listening. But for those who are like confused by that and really are sticklers about the law, it's like, even if you abide by the law, you respect the law, this process is going to take forever. Think of all the dogs that are stuck in those conditions and then might not even be in their favor, even though it's so obvious.
And another thing I think people should know if they're considering taking action is that it's not easy, as you saw, to even get to trial or get charges against you because the corporations don't want to deal with it. On March 15th, when 27 of us were arrested, we stood in the rain refusing to leave for hours until the police would agree to arrest us. And we wouldn't let them just cite us and arrest us. We arrest us and cite us with some ticket of trespassing. We insisted on going to the courthouse and getting booked. And I ended up spending 5 days in jail. Five of us ended up spending 2 days in jail because we were considered organizers, I guess. I think that's why. And then the other 20 were released, and we have court dates in May. But I'm hoping that they won't drop the charges, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was another thing of corporations not wanting to have to deal with a trial, deal with activists, because then we're going to be talking about the right to rescue, animal rights, and the cruelty that was done by humans, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I think, because after this came out online, there's people in the comment sections commenting on everything. There's people who've never thought about animal rights before chiming in. And a lot of people that I read were like, why would they do this? Why would they want to be arrested? And you're here saying like, we want to be arrested because we want to take this to court because we have a good case. And also the publicity. I think people automatically think arrested equals bad, which police brutality, it depends on who you are, if you're in a marginalized group, all of these things to consider. But like making the news and starting that conversation and bringing all of this awareness will actually make you safer in court once you get there.
That's true. That's true. Public opinion is very, very helpful to protect ordinary citizens who feel like they're doing the right thing, but come up against large corporations or law enforcement. Yeah.
Right. And you've done multiple actions and open rescues. So I would love for you to tell us, like, literally how you did this. I mean, one, because I think it's just a fantastic story. And two, I want to let people know that this is a possibility. Because I just remember years ago when I don't even know what year it was. When I went into my first factory farm, it was just me and friends getting together and, hey, we're going on a Friday night. And until I heard about someone else doing that, it was never on my radar. But once I saw the stories and I'm like, oh, this is possible for everyday people, like, let's go. I want to inspire other people to get into that mindset.
So you want me to share about how we did it at Ridglan on March 15th?
Yeah, like literally the logistics is like you pulled up, you smashed open a window, like how what did that look like?
Okay, well, I can't give away everything, but I will
Right.
tell you. And first of all, I just want to say, I am not an organizer. Wayne Shung is an amazing community organizer. I am terrified of even having my book group over to my house because I am
Yeah.
so worried about other people not having a good time, not being successful. I mean, the worst. So I am not, I'm a lackey here. I just did what I was told. Okay. So, otherwise, because I mean, for Wayne to have this vision of basically, he put it out to the world that on March 16th, I think it was Monday, March 16th, people who cared about these beagles should come to Wisconsin and be prepared to go to Ridglan Farms on March 16th and rescue the beagles peacefully. I was like, oh my God, I believe that these beagles need to be rescued. I don't know if this is going to work because you're asking a whole bunch of people that you don't know to come just a couple days before and be peaceful and be trained, and you're telling the authorities when you're coming. And the reason he did this was to have complete transparency because we're doing the right thing. And so I signed up. I said, yep, I'll go. And we trained in nonviolence, and we trained in, how to, actually, one thing I didn't train in is how to carry a dog, which some
Right.
people, we talked
Right.
about later. And because, you don't, a lot of people haven't picked up a dog. They might pick up a cat, but dogs. And I worried later when I saw my little beagle on my arm, like his head was shaking, that maybe I should have had him down on my shoulder. So we had to walk like a quarter of a mile in the fields to get him to safety. So, but we pulled up as a team. There were teams who stayed on the road and were part of a team that did not break any trespassing laws. They didn't go on to private property. There were teams who were designed just to protect the people going in and rescuing the beagles, to surround them if a cop came up, so that they couldn't be touched by the beagle rescuer couldn't be touched by a cop. There would be other people in the way. And they were amazing, that team. And then there were the people who went in to rescue the beagles. And we drove up in tandem, parked, got out. Oh, and we went a day early because there was going to be a huge snowstorm on the March 16th.
Hmm.
So, huge, 12 feet. 12 inches, several
Gosh.
feet. Not 12
Yeah.
feet, like 12 inches of storm that day. That's why if you see the footage, you'll see it's raining and then hailing and then it snowed. So anyway,
Wow.
it did end up being, I was in jail, but I heard that there was a lot of snow. When I got out, there was snow. So, so we pulled up, and as a group, we each fanned out to different buildings and attempted to get into those buildings. They knew we were coming, so they had reinforced the buildings. And a team got into one building, and so everybody went to that building, and we removed the dogs in there. We were wearing biosuits because when you enter a building that's closed, I know they're filthy, but just so that, out of respect for the animals, and just to be able to say that we didn't bring disease into a building, which would be a specious argument anyway. But we were already wearing white suits, and we put on our booties right outside the door and went in and got dogs out. And a few nights ago I woke up and I was thinking, oh, why didn't we get every dog out? We got 31 dogs out, but there were still, in that area, there were still like at least 8, I think, because when we went back to try and get them, more of them, the place was surrounded by police by then, and we couldn't get back in. And I wished that I thought, maybe should I have taken a second dog? We talked about holding 2 dogs, but one of them could have jumped out, even though we did have a leash. There were so many things that you just, afterwards you think, should I have done this? Because when we went, we delivered the dogs to vans that were waiting, who were then driven to I don't know where, because we siloed the information of where the dogs were going. And a group of us who hadn't been arrested yet went back in, but we couldn't get into the buildings again because there were police surrounding it, so we couldn't get those dogs. And then after a lot of waiting and negotiation, and we were taken to the Dane County Police Station and booked.
Right. So it's literally you pulling up, you entering the buildings, and you just physically taking the animals and then parting ways with them when you're arrested and they go off to safety.
They got off to safety, and some of them didn't. 8 of them were taken either from the arms of activists or from the vans. There's footage of that online too, which is heartbreaking. and they were removed and they were returned to Ridglan, which you'd think in a criminal case they wouldn't be returned right to the place. If you want to bring a
Right.
case that they would be considered, valuable evidence. But no, they went right back there to, yeah.
The haunting feeling or the haunting thought that I just had is like that's probably the only time those dogs had ever been outside and had fresh air, had ever seen the sun, the sky. That was like a moment, and then they were sent back in.
Yeah. And it was raining and it was cold and we had towels, and there's a beautiful video of one of the beagles looking up to the sky and sticking his tongue out
Oh,
because it was raining. So
oh,
anyway,
wow.
they're so sweet. I mean, none of the beagles squirmed or anything that I know of. They just let themselves be carried through the field, up and down. The terrain wasn't easy, and they just let themselves be carried because
Wow.
they're
And
docile.
right, right, which is the amazing thing and also the problem.
Yeah.
Also makes them a target. Um, I was thinking about like those moments where you're actually there inside and you're seeing all of this in person and you're, reaching for those dogs. And I've had moments in factory farms where I just take a second and I feel so like it just feels so dark. The energy is so dark. It's so haunting. To me, it feels so sinister. And I'm just wondering what the energy was inside for you because some people can't even go to a shelter to see dogs, that are in a shelter, that are in cages back there and they're barking and they're stressed. Like people can't even handle that. And you're going into this facility where that's their life times 20 and it's never going to end.
I just want to do an aside. That is a pet peeve of mine that people can't stand go to shelters, so they'll buy from a breeder instead because they don't want to hurt their little human hearts. Even though it's because of humans that any of those dogs are in there. It's not because of the fault of the dogs, and it really makes me mad. I volunteer at my local shelter walking dogs, and it breaks my heart when people say to me, oh, I can't possibly go in there. It's just so terrible. And I'm thinking, well, that's why you have to go in there and you have to look.
Right.
I remember when my
Right.
friend Karen Dawn wrote a blog, and this is when I was vegetarian, not vegan. And so I still had dairy. And she said, here's a video. And it was a video of a farm man kicking calves and punching cows, and she said, you need to watch this, especially if you eat dairy. And I watched it, and I forced myself to watch it, and I was sobbing through the whole thing. And so I mean, I think we have to sometimes make ourselves feel uncomfortable and see the truth of what we humans do, and the consequences, so that we can do the right thing in our own life. But anyway, having said that,
Right.
no, it was not a dark place. These puppies, okay, it was filthy, it was not ventilated. It
Hmm.
was, we actually went into the puppy barn, which they have better conditions than the older dogs, which was in the barn that my team had originally tried to get into, but we couldn't until this building was breached with the puppies. So we went over there. Um, I think there were 4 puppies to a cage, and it's wire cages, and they were barking and wagging their tails like they were so frenzied, but they're so cute. You just can't, I don't know if you can ever be around beagles and not just be, I mean, to me, now one of my teammates said that he felt sick. The smell was so bad that he wanted to vomit. And I didn't notice
Right.
that because I was just looking at the dogs and thinking, we're going to save you. So to me, it was
Right.
uplifting, and the videos are very uplifting because you've got 30 people going in there, taking out dogs, rescuing dogs. I mean, it's very uplifting. So no, I don't at all think of it as didn't feel dark to me. It felt like I was doing my life's purpose. That day was the best day of my life. I came home and I told my
Wow.
husband and my mom, this is the best day of my life. I woke up with a sense of purpose and community. As a team, we had a higher goal, a mission. I got to hold a dog, and then I got
Hmm.
arrested and I went to jail. I mean, there's nothing better than those things for a higher purpose. It was a perfect
Right.
day, except for that we didn't
Right.
get all the dogs out. Yeah, we only got
Right.
22 to safety. But it's the start. It's the start. And I've learned of being an activist for so many years is that you cannot expect to sit under the tree that you planted and
Mm.
get its shade. You can't. It won't grow big enough probably to do give you shade. You have to just keep planting those trees and hope that in the future they will take root and beautiful things will happen. But until then, you just have to keep doing the right thing.
And how do you
So,
cope with that? Because that's something that I have trouble with. I think honestly, it's why I like doing laundry so much because I see one process come to an end. I see the cycle and it's complete, and I feel like in the rest of my life in activism, that hardly happens. Um, yeah, how do you cope with that? Because I think that's hard for a lot of people, and that's why some people sort of drop off.
yeah, I'm sure it's hard. Well, I find so much inspiration from the people that I'm with. So the community. I
Mm,
think if I were to act alone, it would be super hard. No
right.
doubt, it would really bring me down. But instead, the people in the animal rights world, they lift me up. And we
Mm,
share a passion to do the right thing. And I also don't look at outcomes, like long term outcomes. I only look at doing the right thing for that animal, for that.
mm,
That's what I look at then. And I don't feel, people say, how could you go in? I remember one activist dropped out before the action on March 15th because she said she couldn't deal with going into one of those buildings. And I don't feel my feelings when I'm in there. So when I was in there, I felt like exhilarated and because so much was going on and I had a purpose. I had to avoid the police. I had to get the dog out. We had a plan and we had to execute it. So I'm not using my emotional side at all. And I think
right.
she's actually incorrect. If she'd gone in there, she would actually feel better today, having gone in there and seen it and done something about it, than she thinks. She would have, yeah. So I think we think we're
Right.
going to be overcome with emotion, but in those moments, you probably know. You don't start sobbing and when you're doing a rescue,
Do sometimes.
do you? Oh my gosh! But how can you
Do.
do the rescue? Because my friend Krista Rose, who used to be rescue, he used to go into labs in the 70s and 80s, and he has an organization called Last Chance for Animals. He told me,
Hmm.
Alexandra, there's no place for your emotions when you're doing on a farm or in a lab.
Hmm.
There's absolutely no place. It's not about you. It's not about
Hmm.
us. It's not about our
Yeah.
feelings. It's about them. So I kind of think about that. I mean, there's no doubt that driving
Yeah.
home after doing some investigation on a farm, I I sometimes I feel angry and I cry. And there is also no
Right.
doubt my poor husband has to deal with me that I have had a lot of emotional stuff and I can't sleep. I thought I wasn't sleeping well before the action because I was so worried, but I thought I'd
Hmm.
start sleeping well after the action. And the first night when I came home, I slept super well throughout the night without waking up even to pee, which is unusual for me. But
Hmm.
after that, I've woken up, and even 2 nights ago, I couldn't sleep. So I
Yeah.
guess I do have some emotional stuff. And it's been what,
Right.
5 weeks? It's been 5 weeks since that action. Yeah.
Right. It's interesting. I never thought about the idea that people are going in, and like sort of putting that pause on their emotions because when I've been in factory farms, and many of these times it's been after a natural disaster, like a hurricane or something. And so there's a lot of really graphic things that usually aren't there. But I feel so hyper aware. I feel so present. And sometimes it's so overwhelming, especially if we're a small team and we're in a place where there's hundreds and hundreds of birds, right? And I've had moments where I'm carrying out birds from these situations and like there's they're dying in my arms or like there's these really emotional moments where it's like I'm like, "Oh my God, this is the first time they've ever been outside." And then maybe I'm sitting and waiting for a car or something and I can feel them totally relax because this is the first time they've ever had kindness and then they die. And so I've definitely had these moments where I just, completely like I guess I'm just like crying in the face of it all. Like I'm not even like, oh, I'm upset for myself. I'm like, how tragic for them, like that this is the experience. And I guess I'm just also crying for like them being in that situation because it doesn't have to be like that. That's what really really gets me too. Is like it doesn't have to be this way. And when you do actions like this, I mean, that's showing people that it doesn't have to be this way and like, hey, we can do something about it. Um so yeah, I think it's really amazing what you all did. And yeah, I just hope that more people will embrace direct action. Um,
I
and
want to add
go
that
in
they
if
also
they're
have to
scared.
embrace, they need to embrace also nonviolence.
Right.
That's part of the open rescue experience and mission is to be completely nonviolent because we're trying to stop violence. So, yeah.
Right.
Um, but you know what you went in. So I when I've done investigations, I've been in a lot of different kind of factory farms. That's the first time I was ever in a lab breeding facility. I've never been in a testing lab. But so factory farms are where my experience lies, and I have a lot of experience on a lot of different farms, different animals. But it's never in a crisis situation like what you're talking to. It's business
Mm,
as usual. So I know what I'm
right.
going to see. I mean, sometimes you will see a very sick animal who's in a lot of distress. Those are the ones often we try and save.
Right.
But it's not the flooding right? You went in after the floods.
Yeah, I've been in after floods and after a tornado, different things that have come through, and it's like the factory farm and then it's almost on steroids because it just there's so much wreckage and there's so much injury that it's just so I'm on top of what they're already
Doing.
experiencing in day-to-day life. Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
that's super hard. I'm sure I would get emotional too. I might get emotional there, right then and there. I don't know. I surprise myself because I'm
Right.
pretty emotional, but I surprise myself how I'm just like, one of my team members said, as soon as you got out of the car, Alexandra, you became a different person. And I'm like, really? What was I like? He said, I don't know. You just seemed like you had a mission. I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I
Right.
did have a mission, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah, you literally did have a mission.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love hearing about that process for you. And yeah, encourage people like go in when you're on a mission. Go in crying if you have to. Like go, the important thing is that we go in, that we do these things because this is big news now, but this is such a small group of people and this has not been done that many times. So like this is very new, at least in the Western world, and like I'm sure both of our lifetimes, like this is not a daily occurrence that happens.
Are you talking about the mass open rescues or
Yeah, mass open
right, mass
rescue.
open? No, it hasn't. And Wayne really wants to push forward mass open rescue, just like there were mass civil disobediences during the civil rights movement or during the Salt March in India with Gandhi in I think it was the 40s. He had thousands of people walking. What the story there is that the Indians, the people born in India weren't allowed to sell salt or make money off salt. The British, who they were the imperial colonizers of India at that time, wouldn't let any Indian go and sell any salt on their own, even though it was in the ground, in the soil. And the Great Salt March is when he had thousands of ordinary Indians walk with him. And then I think at the end, he picked up salt and took it like it's mine. I'm going to sell it. And he was arrested for that, and probably a lot of other people too. Um,
Right.
but it broke the English British Empire.
Yeah.
So when you Wayne says, and I agree, is that the more peaceful you are against oppression, the more the repressors lose their power.
Mm,
And that's definitely the images that came out of the civil rights movement in the 60s of
right.
dogs going after protesters and cops with batons and tear gas. that that really helped the civil rights movement move and grow from not just
Right.
people to more people who weren't as directly affected. So now white people, white middle class Americans in the rural, Midwest, were seeing that and going, well, that's not right. I'm not
Right.
on the side of the government. I want those. It's not right what's happening to those people, and that's what we hope to people to see when they see the footage, not only from the Beagle rescue, but also from the most recent. So 5 weeks later, a call was put out for 2,000 people to come to Ridglan and rescue the rest of the 2,000 dogs. It was going to be on March 19th. April 19th. April 19th. Over 2,000 people signed up, 2,100. In fact, by the time I got out of jail,
Wow.
actually 36,000 people had gone to SaveTheDogs.io and said they want to help. 36,000 in just a couple
Wow.
days. And then 2,000 people said, I'm coming to Wisconsin. They joined a team, blah, blah, blah. In the end, 1,000 people showed up that morning of actually March 18th at Ridglan Farms, 1,000 people, and there were 200 cops there. It was absolutely impossible to get in. And the cops used rubber bullets, tear gas, and pepper spray. And for 5 hours, it went on where the protesters just peacefully protested, kept going back to the fence, and they would get sprayed and tear gassed and rubber bullets thrown to the ground, et cetera, et cetera. And so it didn't look good. It didn't look good for, even though no dogs were rescued on April 18th, those dogs will get rescued. I am really confident that even though no beagles were taken out that day, the peaceful action of those 1,000 activists will propel government and law enforcement to now rescue the beagles. It looks too bad for them not to.
Right. Right. It looks awful. We're gonna put a link to both actions on both days so that people can see not only you all going in there and rescuing dogs, but also the outcome and the police brutality and what happened when everyone went back. So people can see what you're talking about. And this brings to mind, we had one Patreon person ask, they specifically want to know how you think this action will impact factory farms in the future, or if you think it will have an impact on them in general.
Meaning this, you mean the whole Ridglan,
Yeah,
the
the whole
movement against
Ridgeland.
Ridglan? I
Yeah.
think, well, dogs are different to non-vegans and average Americans than pigs and cows and goats and things like that, animals like that. I can't believe I said things like that. I meant animals like that, species like
Yeah.
that. But I hope what it will do is will show that animal rights activists aren't crazy people. They come from all walks of life and they deeply, deeply care about equality and justice for dogs and cows.
Right.
And hopefully it'll help the average American bridge that gap that they now have. That it's terrible to keep dogs in these cages for 7 years, but it's completely fine to do that for cows or
Right.
chickens. So I
Right.
think it will have a net positive.
Oh, I think so I think that it will for sure. Um, what would you say to those people directly, in case any of them are listening that are not vegan, that feel heartbroken by the conditions at Ridgeland Farms, but haven't bridged that gap? Um, what would you say to them to help them do that?
A lot of the people who went to Ridgeland Farms were not vegan. They just
Wow.
love dogs. Yeah.
Wow.
Especially the second action with the 1,000 people. Yeah. But, and I remember somebody I respect very much, who's an incredible activist, said to me, I don't think people have to be vegan to rescue animals, just like climate activists still drive cars. And he's
Right.
right. He's right. We don't have to be 100% pure before we can start advocating for animals. But I have to say that for me, when I went from vegetarian, which I became vegetarian when I was 14, and I didn't go vegan until I was 47. So that's 33 years where I didn't wear clothes that were made of animals since my 20s. I didn't use things tested on animals since my 20s, but I never got that little bit of dairy out. And I liked frozen yogurt and Caesar salads. And that's what I would eat sometimes. Quite often, I would have dairy. And so when I became vegan, it was like an awakening. And you'd think that somebody had been vegetarian since she was 14 and now is
Right.
49, that it wouldn't be an awakening, it would just be one more step. And just giving up that dairy, even, and I'd already given up, done so many steps towards animal rights, except for that. Huh.
Mm,
It was amazing how I changed as a person. I changed
mm,
so much becoming vegan. It just made me see the world. It's like the scales, I say. The scales fell from my eyes, truly, and I started
mm.
understanding more about how all the injustices in the world. But I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt empowered because I was making decisions in my everyday life that were to forward justice. So it didn't make me feel bad that I was seeing more injustice and speciesism.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I feel like every time I talk to you about things, you have such this positive outlook on things where, someone could wallow when they start seeing they start noticing because they've been there, but they start noticing all the ways that we oppress and harm animals, and they could say, "Oh my goodness, this is too much for me. I need to, crawl back into a hole." And you're saying, "Hey, I saw it, and guess what I did? I'm moving forward."
Yeah,
So
because you
that's
feel
just
empowered and
refreshing.
inspired and excited about life instead of hiding. And now, look, I'm sure there are things, I'm not doing because they would feel over. We all have our limits, right? But I
Right.
think a lot of people don't even push against those limits and see how actually when you push through, like there's a big world out there that's so empowering, a big way of living that is wonderful. I do think community is very important and positivity and nonviolence. I think those are just really strong, important tenets to have in one's activism to keep one from burning out.
Right. Right. I was just thinking today, because I saw some comments online that were from vegans that said, "Hey, I've never met another vegan in the flesh." They're walking this journey completely alone. And so I thought I'm gonna make a resource that teaches people how to make vegan friends, and find this community that you're talking about. So I will also link that in the show notes for people. And one of the ways that I've suggested people can do this is by joining, whether it's grassroots activism or outreach or a direct action. Like, this is a way that you can start building that community and build up that positive feeling inside of you.
Yes, and if you're interested in specifically learning more about this action, you can go to savethedogs.io and learn more.
Is there anything else that listeners should do if they want to support this action, whether it's sharing things online or supporting a legal fund? Everything's going to be on the website?
Yes, but I would say that right now, what you can do, and I don't know if it's on the website, but I'm pretty sure it is, you can write to Governor Evers. He's the governor of Wisconsin. It's so easy. It takes I did it the day before yesterday. It takes like 2 minutes to say, Governor Evers, Wisconsin, email, and they'll send it to you, and you fill out a form, and you say, you don't talk a lot, just say, please save the Ridglan Beagles.
Mhm.
Please. And you don't have, that's all you have to say because all they want to know is your
Right.
opinion. Now, it's true that if you don't live in Wisconsin, you have a little less power. It's more effective if you have your own legislator to contact about an issue and something they can directly change. And believe me, unfortunately, there undoubtedly is in your area a way to something to contact your representative about, but contact Evers anyway if it's about Ridgeland, because the more that they get, the more they understand that you might be living in another state, but that means that there's a bunch of Wisconsinites who also care about the issue who just aren't writing.
Right, right. Well, beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with today?
No, just thank you so much, Calen, for having me on and shedding a spotlight on this specific issue, and for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you